right. Good morning. All right, I'm here for Says Motivational Talk, my YouTube channel. Y'all go like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, Says Motivational Talk. Good morning. Now I'm here because the holiday season is approaching. We're approaching Christmas, New Year's, full of joy, full of cheer, full of love, but not for everyone. You know, it's hard for some people to manage their emotions and thoughts and their feelings through the holiday season. Now, some of you like, what are you talking about? The holidays are the best time of the year. It's full of joy and love, giving, hope, and that's not the case for everybody. Because to those people, the holidays can bring a lot of negative feelings too. Now, for those of us who naturally struggle with depression, for those of us who lost someone close to us either this year or previous years, and for those that have moved somewhere new and you're not around your family, and there's changes in your custody and you don't have your child this year for the holidays. There are lots of changes and a lot of things that each and every one of us are dealing with internally. It's not happy for everybody. So on that note, bad things do happen to good people. One thing we do know, if your wife says you are a man of God, you are a man of God. If anybody knows who you are, your wife does. So that's clear. But it does not stop death. Death has this ability to defy reason and pick and choose whoever it will, and whenever he will, sparing not the young or the old. There is no guarantee, because you are young, that you will get to be old. Old is a gift given by God. It is not a promise. To grow old, to live long enough to grave, is a gift given by God. It is not a right that you can assume, so you have to live every day as if you might not make it to tomorrow. Such was the case in my situation. Never knowing I would finish raising one of my sons, that me and my wife would not grow old together. I would not be that force to provide and to protect for them. The breath has gone out of their nostrils, and there's nothing left as evidence. And they're about to come and get that they was ever here except for the cry of a father, husband, son, and daughter. The absence has left me ill prepared for the challenges of the time. Not only did we suffer the emotional toll of them being snatched out the house, but also the economic impact, because our home was based on two-person income. And little by little, the cabinets grew empty. And little by little, the pockets grew empty. And little by little, we started living off of promises that could not be fulfilled. Let me say, this trouble will come to anybody, even men and women of God. I don't care how you pray. I don't care how you fast. I don't care how you talk in tongues and dance all over. Death does not exempt you from having dark days and empty days and days of overwhelming wins and complications. Now, I'm not going to mention when everything was full and everything was going well and everything was overflowing, because that is irrelevant. God is showing us how to survive emptiness. Just like the widow in 2 Kings, 4th chapter, 1 through 3. She has lost everything, and the only thing she has left is her sons. She's about to lose them too. Now, when you read the text, Elijah comes on the scene, and she reminds him who her husband was. She says, "My husband was your mentee. He went to your school of prophecy. He was a good man of God, and now he's gone." Now, she doesn't come in her name because she doesn't have the clout in her name to provoke a miracle, but she knows who name to call to get Elijah's attention. And she says, "My husband was one of your spiritual sons, and he's dead, and I'm his wife. And they're about to come and get my sons." And Elijah says, "What am I to do with thee?" So what do you do when you meet somebody in a particular part of their life that threatens to define and deter the rest of your life? What do you do when you meet someone at a moment in time of desperation? What do you do when you're expecting you to do something beyond human rationale? Then he asks her, "What is in your house?" Now, God will always use something you already got, whether it's a pot of oil, a handful of meal, or 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. But miracles start out of normalcy. Miracles are birthed when God begins to magnify that which you have overlooked and thought was invaluable. And it might have been invaluable in your hand, but it might not have been valuable in your hands, but it becomes invaluable when you place it in the hands of God. What the prophet does, his presence illuminates that which you have ignored. What do you have in your house? You telling me about what you lost. I want to know what you got left, because God never uses what you lost. No, he's not interested in you giving a list about who all left you, who hurt you, who forsook you. That's carnal talk. God doesn't need anything you lost to bless you. God will always use what you got left. And she says, "I don't have anything left." This is not written to give us the history of this woman's life. God does not deal with her bank account during that time. She had a husband. God does not talk about her good days, because faith does not shine in your good days. Faith always shines when hell is breaking loose in your life. You will never experience the power of God when you're on the mountaintop. Who needs God on the mountaintop? You need God when you're in the valley and you're at your wit's end and you don't know what else to do. And I want to talk about this because I know from experience, she spent many a sleepless nights. So I know, but the Bible doesn't say it. But when you are about to lose your sons, you don't go to bed when you're about to take my kids. She had turmoil and discomfort. She was stressed out and at her wit's end. And she said, "I don't have nothing. I don't have nothing but a pot of oil." And then he says to the woman who is already in debt, "Go borrow. Go borrow." Did he not hear me tell him that I am in debt? Who loans to somebody that is in debt? I ain't got no credit. My credit score is down to 200. I don't have no credit. I can't get a car. I can't get a house. I can't get an apartment. My credit is bad. The creditors are coming to take my child. that I use my children as collateral. I'm broke. And you tell me to go borrow? You have the nerve to tell me that I am not empty enough. Okay, hear that and let that sink in your head. That God is saying it's not bad enough. When it gets bad enough, you'll see my hand. When it gets bad enough, you'll see my glory. Woo. When it gets bad enough, I'll open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing. You don't have room enough to receive, but you're talking about it's child's play. You talking about you in debt, and God says, go borrow. See, this is for radical people. This is not for your average, ordinary, superficial Sunday morning person. This is for radical people who are backed in a corner and shoved to the wall and don't have no choice but to believe God. Because if you don't believe God, you're going under. If you don't believe God, you're going down. If you don't believe God, you're going to lose everything you got. If you don't believe God, you are never going to get out of this. I want to talk to somebody who's in enough trouble to hear this message. Some of y'all are doing too good to hear this message. Some of y'all got too much to get this message. Some of you are too intellectual to get this message. Some of you are too full to get this message. God is best experienced from a place of vulnerability. All the teaching you have heard about praise and worship and how to get glory out of God, all that is cute for people who is not in trouble. It only becomes substance when you are desperate enough for the word to come alive. Go borrow. Go borrow from your neighbors. But it's not that he told her to go borrow. That is not what I'm talking about. Sometimes we start talking about making room for God, and we start talking about economic impact, and we start talking about God and finances, and sometimes we talk to your valley isn't deep enough to get God to let it rain. And sometimes you have to dig ditches in your valley in order to attract God, because when God comes, he's going to come with such force that your little problem isn't deep enough to get him to flow in your life. But I'm not going to talk about that today. But it's good to know that sometimes the only way to get out of trouble is to get deeper into trouble, and you have to be desperate to receive that, because if you're rational, you won't get that. You have to be desperate enough to throw in your everything and say, I ain't got nothing to lose. If I lose it, I'm going down anyway. I got nothing to lose. It is your nothingness that attracts God. It is your void. It is a vacuum. It is the pit of need in your life that attract God. It is not your stuff. It is not your degrees. It is not your money. It is not your Gucci bag. It is your find somewhere down in your soul. You got to be empty enough to have faith experience. You have to be vulnerable enough to have faith experience. Jesus would not need to teach you how to walk when you were walking on concrete. It's only when you're walking on water. You have to be vulnerable enough for God to get your full and undivided attention. God has this woman attention, and he says, go borrow from your neighbors. Now, it's one thing to evoke, but it's another thing to be broke, but it's another thing to tell your neighbors you're broke. They already talking funny. They already looking at you crazy. is not kept, manicured, and the house needs painting, they already know that they already noticed that you haven't got your hair done. And God says, go tell your neighbors that you need something. And he doesn't tell you to beg for it in the sense of asking them to give it to you. He says, this won't take long. Just borrow it. This situation you in right now will not last. You just need to borrow a solution, because after a while, everything you lost is going to come back. Everything that got away is going to come running back. Everybody who walked off is going to come knocking on your door. This is a temporary situation. And he says, go to your neighbors and go knocking on doors with your son that they're about to take. Send them out in the neighborhood. Now, when you borrow something, it has to have value. Nobody that's listening to me right now goes up to a bad lady and asks for a loan. Nobody goes into a trash can and says, I want to borrow some food. When you borrow something, there is a perceived value in order to go after it. And when God says he values his vessels, God says he values vessels. Why does God value vessels? When everybody else values content, does nobody normally go down to the store to get a bottle? I don't want the bleach. Just give me the bottle. God says borrow vessels, not just any kind of vessel. He says, I want you to get empty vessels. In order to get your miracle, I'm not taking any kind of vessels. Don't bring me a half full vessel. Don't bring me 3/4 full. Don't bring me 1/3 full. They must be empty to be eligible. If you got an idea left, you're not empty enough. If you got a plan B and a backup plan and a contingency plan and a plan C, you're not empty enough. It is not the text I'm contemplating. It is the text against the times we are living in. Because we are living in some times right now of emptiness. I wonder if anybody that's watching me been feeling empty now. Now, I must make this distinction between being empty and being tired. Now, if you get some sleep and you wake up in the morning and you feel better, but if you empty, sleep will not resolve it. If there is anybody who woke feeling as bad as you did when you laid down, it's not that you're tired, it's that you're empty. This message goes out to people who have been having this indescribable feeling that you don't even understand, that you have seen much and heard so much and watched so much and read so much and seen so much news and read so many texts and seen many things tweeted and seen many things happening in your personal life, in your financial life, in your public life, in our professional life, and so many people been calling you, asking for advice and for help and encouragement, to the point it's not that I don't like you, but I saw it was your number and I did not answer because I don't like. But it's not because I don't like you. I said I'm empty. I want to talk to some people who are just feeling empty, not happy, not sad, just empty. People keep asking, how are you? And you can't even find a word to articulate how you've been feeling, because you're not used to describing yourself as if your contents were gone, because you've never been drained like you've never been drained here lately, and you are feeling empty. In psychology, they call it compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is when you have had so many disastrous things happen, one on top of the other, 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 that you run out of compassion. Now, it's hard to quantify compassion because we don't know where compassion stays. We don't know if it's in our liver, our lungs, our heart, our tissue, your kidneys. We don't know where it stays. But we know when it's gone. We can't describe, but we could figure out where it stayed. We could block them from taking it. But little by little, day by day, hour by hour, every phone call, every situation, every problem, every dilemma has taken its toll, and you run out of something that an accountant cannot account for, that a lawyer cannot fight for, that an agriculturalist cannot grow back. You run out of compassion now. You're empty. Empty is running out of care. I don't care. I don't care what I put on. I don't care what I look like. I don't care that I haven't shaved. I don't care that I haven't done my hair. I don't care that my nails have grown out. I don't care because I don't care. I spent all my care on you, and now not only am I broke, but I also run out of care. And now I'm just empty. Empty is walking around with a sad face and nobody died. Empty is walking around without any kind of expression because you run out of the energy that it takes to have an impact. Empty is letting the kids do whatever they want to do and you don't even say nothing because you're just empty. I'm tired of arguing with you. Go wherever you want to go because mama is just empty. I ain't got no more. I ain't got no more. I don't have no more advice. I don't have no more energy. I don't have no more passion. I don't have no more advice. I am empty. Who wants to hire an empty person? You hire people for their creativity. You value them for their knowledge and intellect. You hire people who got passion and the energy and the insight and ideas. And God said, I don't want none of that stuff. I don't want ideas. I don't want creativity. I don't want passion. Go borrow me some empty. Ugh. Can you imagine being the little boys who are about to be taken for debt and in a last surge of hope go knocking on doors and mama said, can we borrow some empty? Your sons had to go on knocking on doors and said, mama said, can we borrow some empty? How do you fix your mouth to ask me for empty? I can see wanting a cup of sugar. I can see wanting more than a handful of milk. I can see wanting to borrow some soap, dishwashing liquid, but your mama sent me over here to ask for some empty. That's what the prophet told the woman that God values. That God values you the most when you're not full. Not when you're overflowing. Not when you got all kind of creative impact and energy. That God values you the most when you are empty. God creates empty when, in the book of Genesis, when he reached down into the earth and he formed man from the dust of the earth, he formed an empty vessel. He was careful. He didn't form it full. He formed it empty. And he wanted it to be empty so he'd have something to blow into. Y'all don't hear me? Out of the dust of the earth, old clay pot, an odd empty vessel called Adam. Made of red earth, God shaped him and formed him. And when God made him empty, then God was attracted to him. Ooh, so there it is. God is. We see the master himself hovered over the top of an empty vessel as if he were an eagle hovering over an egg, as if he were about to hatch something. God came down from eternity, stepped over into time, and hovered over an empty vessel. And he was so attracted to it that he kissed the empty vessel, and when he kissed it, he blew in his mouth. And the breath of life, and he became a living soul. I don't know who I'm talking to, but God is getting ready to kiss somebody. Daddy is getting ready to kiss somebody who has been walking around for the last 3 weeks with an indescribable emptiness down inside of you, a void, a vacuum that nothing seems to fill. You're watching TV, but you're distracted. You're listening at the news, but you're only half listening at it. You're going through the motions. You can't even remember for sure if it's Wednesday or Thursday or it's Friday or Tuesday. You just empty. But God is attracted to empty. And so he hovered over the empty vessel and blew into it. And so the breath of life it became a living soul. Now later on, as we turn the pages of the Bible, we see where God tells Moses on the mountaintop to form a tabernacle, and Moses formed the tabernacle. And once he got the tabernacle all formed, then God said, fill it with furniture, and begin to fill that which was empty with furniture, and that when he made the holiest of holies, God said, if you make the holiest of holies and you make it empty, I'll come in and fill it with glory. And the glory was called Shekinah glory. And that means presence of God, selling or divine presence of God. He that hungers and thirsts after righteousness shall be filled. And door by door, house by house, neighbor by neighbor, the boys went out, and they gathered was empty. And they kept coming back to Mama's house, bringing empty vessels, one right after another. The Bible doesn't tell us how many they brought, but the Bible does tell us that the oil then began to flow until it found empty. There is a glory that God will only release on somebody who comes into his presence and you dare to come empty. I'm out of ideas. I'm out of concepts. And I don't have nobody else to call. God said, you just right for me. Because what I've been waiting on you to do is run out. Run out of people to call, and run out of people to trust. Run out of people to explain yourself to, and run out of people with ideas. Run out of your education. When you run out of empty, I'm going to fill you with the glory. The question isn't, can he supply? The question is, do I have enough empty to attract God's attention? Look how God moves. They brought the empty vessels to the pot of oil. She already had it. She know it was a pot of oil. A pot of oil is measurable. It is finite, meaning having limits or bounds. What is a pot of oil against all these empty vessels? So she took a pot of oil and she picked it up. When the pot begins to pour, the oil begins to flow. It was a pot till she poured. See, you think you know what you got, but you don't know what you got till you pour it. As long as you save it and you don't know what you got, it's in the process of pouring. You think you know what you can do, but you don't know what you can do until you have to pour it out. It's when you pour, when you multiply. It's when you pour, when you get increase. It's when you pour, when you go from finite to infinite. somewhere between being straight up vertical and being turned over horizontal. As the oil began to flow, it began to multiply. As long as they had empty vessels, the oil continued to flow. So the oil is not flowing in proportion to its container. It is flowing in proportion to the emptiness of what's in front of it. God is not limited by the containers we put in God, that we put him in. God is not limited to the churches we build. God is not limited to the size of our sanctuary. He said, let me show you how big I am. I'll shut the doors on your church. Ooh, he did that. It's funny. He flows more with the door shut than he did when the doors were open. They shut the door in the upper room and God began to flow. They shut the door in the tomb and God got up out the grave. Oh, look, somebody say, let it flow. And the Bible said, the more they came empty, the more the oil began to flow. The secret to your next miracle is come empty. The secret to your next breakthrough is come empty. The secret to your increase is come empty. That's why Jesus blessed the widow's mite. The Bible said all the rich people gave an offering, but the widow gave all she had. And when God saw her empty, he said, she's more blessed than anybody else. The more you come empty, the more the oil flow. And they say, Mama was standing there, and she was pouring out the oil. And she said, bring me another vessel. And when they ran out of empty, the oil stayed. You know what's wrong with the church today? We have run out of empty. You don't come if the right person ain't preaching. You don't come if you can't get a good parking space. You don't come if the choir ain't singing your song. You don't come till there's going to be a concert. You don't come till you're going to be on TV. And you've been missing the point. It ain't about who's preaching. It ain't about who's singing. It ain't about who's leading the worship. Back in the old days, when I was young, they didn't care who was singing or preaching. And the folks who were singing couldn't sing. But it didn't matter, because we didn't come to hear folks sing. We didn't come to hear flesh preach. We came laying at the altar, and we came empty. If you come empty, God will fill your life. If you stop trying to act so full of yourself and just lift your hand and open your mouth and empty before him, there's an oil that's going to flow on you. Right there in your living room. Right there by the bed. Right there by the couch. If you just admit, I'm empty. I'm tired.